Hello everyone, my name is Kerry Ramirez from Studymove, and in this weekly chat we are having a look to the total number of temporary visa holders in Australia. We're having a close look to this chat because in many ways this chat explains the shift in migration policies that we had experienced recently here in Australia. Now, we're also going to look at the implications that this chat may have in the international education sector, and also some considerations that I think are important to have a more accurate analysis in the following months. Let me start with explaining that this big figure of temporary visa holders in Australia includes 10 main categories of visa holders. In general, it's basically individuals who are temporarily in Australia for studying, working, and visiting purposes. Of course, includes other categories, but that's the main aspect that comes in this metric. Now, as you can see on the screen, this metric actually had a very important dive during the pandemic due to the closure of international borders. And then in 2023 and 2024, we actually experienced a very significant growth. The last figure that has been provided by the Department of Home Affairs on the 29th of February shows that we reached the highest number of temporary visa holders, reaching 2.8 million individuals, which represents about 22% more than what it was reported during the same period in 2019. Now, if we look only at the number of student visa holders, basically the component of student visa holders that come part of this particular metric, you will see that basically student visa holders had a very similar trend. Let's just look at detail at this green bar that shows only student visa holders. As I said, it's basically a very similar trend. During the pandemic, we actually had a dip and then a very rapid growth that we experienced in this number in 2023 and 2024. The latest figure, once again, shows that in the 29th of February 2024, we had more than 700,000 student visa holders in Australia, which is 22% more in comparison to the same period last year and 16% more to the pre-pandemic levels in 2019. This is once again the highest number of student visa holders reported in Australia ever. I think there are just two important considerations that we need to look at when we are looking at this particular figure, especially because there is a lot of analysts that are linking that this surge of the number of student visa holders is affecting housing in Australia, which we know that it partially is true, but is not the main reason why housing has been an issue in Australia. And I think that it's important just to look at these considerations so we can actually move forward and have a better sense of this particular number. The first one is actually the location of these 700,000 student visa holders. And this is important because for many years now, the Department of Education has done an extraordinary job to explain that these student visa holders, they are not necessarily here in Australia. In fact, the latest figure reported by the Department of Education shows that basically 18% of these student visa holders are no longer in Australia anymore. It's part of the flows and the dynamic of the international education sector that I think is important to consider. And it's important because 18% may not look like a big number, but if you can actually see, it's about 128,000 individuals who are not in Australia at the moment that this figure has been reported, or is an estimate that they are not here. And 128,000 is a very large number. It's about 1/3 of the population of Canberra, for example. So in order to have a better sense and to understand the possible implication that this surge on demand could have in housing and other services, I think we need to discount that not everybody actually is in Australia at the moment that the visas are reported. In fact, actually, when you look by sector, it's even more interesting because the same figure provided by the Department of Education shows that 28% of higher education student visa holders are actually not in Australia. Now, probably you'll be wondering why we have this large number of students who are no longer in Australia who still have visas. Well, there are some students who are deciding that they will complete their programs online, so they return to their countries and they actually take 1 or 2 units just to complete the program online. We also have students that, as part of their degree, decide just to go overseas, just to do an exchange program or any of other learning abroad experiences offered in particular by universities that enrich their study experience. And the fact that they leave the country is not canceling their visas. But the largest number of these students actually are connected to the next assumption that we need to make to understand this figure correctly. And this is the periodicity on when the number has basically reported. Because we actually have a lot of students who complete their program in November or December every year, and they actually return to their country, but their visas do not expire until the end of March. So this particular figure that we receive on the 29th of February includes the component of 2 students, includes new students who are arriving to start their programs, but they also include a large number of students who are no longer in Australia and their visas are still active because that's basically how the system works. In fact, this was actually explained many times during the pandemic. Once again, based on the great job done by the Department of Education, when we were looking on a monthly basis the number of student visa holders who is outside of Australia, who is inside of Australia, they explained that it's usually in the end of March when a lot of visas expire, and that's why we actually see that there is a big dip in the number of student visa holders. So basically, this figure in particular needs to have a better periodicity. For example, if we actually look not at the latest figure that is the first quarter of each year, but instead we actually look at the previous one, which is the December one, you will see how significant is the difference. For example, this figure in the last year, between 713,000 reported at the 29th of February, there is a big difference to the figure reported in December of 547,000. So which one do you choose? The one of December that doesn't include new arrivals that start the program in February, or the one that is reported on the 29th of February that actually includes a lot of students who are no longer in Australia? Well, this happens actually often when you do this kind of analysis, and the best way to fix it is when you actually look at something that is called a seasonally adjusted figure. And that's exactly what we need so we can actually have a better sense of the actual number of students who may have an effect in housing, and in this way we can have a better assessment of the magnitude of the shift in the migration policy. Finally, to complete this chart of the week, I think it's important just to have a quick look to the complete universe of temporary visa holders and how much they have increased since 2019. Overall, since 2019 and looking at the latest figure in 2024, there are nearly 500,000 more additional visa holders. And these are the top categories who have shown the largest increment since 2019. The first one is temporary resident or employment, that, as you can see on the screen, moved from 41,000 to 179,000. Followed for temporary graduates. These are graduates on post-study work rights that jump from 80,000 to 194,000. And the third category is student visa holders. Other categories, as you can see on the screen, also had report a growth, visitors, a special category, and working holiday makers. Finally, just an additional consideration. The government is not only looking at the number of temporary student visa holders, it's actually looking at what is called net overseas migration, which looks at basically the arrivals, but also the number of individuals departing Australia. And there are some documents from the Treasury, and in general, the aim of the government is just to reach net migration at the levels that we had back in 2019, which is about 250,000 individuals per every financial year. I'm saying this because I think that the side of the patches is one side that, from an education sector, we are sometimes forgetting about it. And a good reminder of this is something that goes in particular for the university sector. We're putting a lot of effort and focus on the arrival of students, which interestingly, when we look at how many just for higher education, student visa holders for higher education are more in comparison to 2019. This is based on the latest figures. It's about 50, 60, 57,000. What we haven't considered is that as part of the degree, many Australian university students actually they leave the country, which in a way is a way to see also like a net migration aspect of this conversation. These departures, we call in the sector learning abroad, is an area that usually it's forgotten by the sector. And I'm just putting these numbers out there because I think it's important to incorporate this also in the analysis and in the mix. And it will be quite interesting just to see if eventually we find a way in which institutions who are actually promoting opportunities for students to go overseas, they actually get incentivized to do that. It's an acknowledging that in a way they're actually bringing a much better balance into the sector and into this conversation of net migration. I insist, unfortunately, this is an area that we forget about it. And for that reason, I thought it was important just to highlight that we also have a part to play in the net migration conversation, not only from the arrival side of things, but also in the departure side of things. And some universities in Australia are doing extremely well in that particular area. And I think this is something that could bring a win-win scenario for everyone. Okay. I hope this very, very brief analysis, we know that there is a lot more to look at, helps. We just want to bring something together just to have a better understanding and to put some ideas that hopefully will help your institution and will help the sector and in general the broader community to have a better understanding of how we can move forward in this very, very important topic that we are all facing. Thank you very much. I'm Kerry Ramirez from Studymove, and it's great to see you again. Take care. See you. Bye.